Hello, Oxygen community. Okay, I am kind of sad, but this is 3 of 3 with our amazing contributor, Michele Mollard. We have brought her back because the video that we did originally in our Women in Business series actually got the most views on my entire YouTube channel because she's amazing. So we are doing a 3-part series about what to do when your business is in some kind of flux. And right now we are going to talk about what it takes to flourish. We did two segments about deciding if you were the problem when your business is in the ups and downs, what to do if you are in survival mode. And today we are going to talk about some of the things you can do to get your business to flourish. So welcome back, Michele.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, so this one might get fun, but we're going to try to keep it to 15 minutes. So let's talk about some of the, let's say, triggers that you think come out when somebody says, okay, we're ready to grow. Like, what are the first things that pop into your head when you're like, oh God, okay, let's do this?
Yeah, I think the first thing that pops into my head is, are we building a 2-story house on a basement that can only hold 1-story house?
Oh, yeah.
That is the first thing that pops into my head. So we dig in a little bit harder to make sure that, again, we all, especially as all of us entrepreneurs, we are wired to leap, right? We are in the world of Kobe. We are often quick starts and it's like, jump. Do I have a parachute? Oh, yeah. Whoops. Right. Yeah. And so that is the kind of thing is we're ready to go. We just got to make sure that that foundation is there. So.
Yeah. And, we talked a lot about those in the previous section, right? Like survival. And that wasn't necessarily just for people who were going, oh shit, right? Some of that was future proofing your business. So if you didn't listen to that, go back. But some of this is really making sure that you know your numbers, which was about that kind of whole segment, but a little bit deeper. And then what next? So if somebody knows their numbers, maybe not full EOS numbers, but really has a solid basis, maybe they've got a really great accountant and they feel solid working with a coach, what would be your next piece of advice?
Yeah, I would say, what are your processes, right? And so how are we digging into there? So there's an expression in the world of EOS is, how do we systemize the predictable so we can humanize the exceptional? So I'll say one more time for those who are taking notes. How do we systemize the predictable so we can humanize the exceptional? And so just to wrap your head around that is, what in our world is predictable, is normal. So in a hiring process, we know we have to write job descriptions. We can systemize that. We know we have to post the job. We can systemize that, right? We know we have to interview. We can systemize that. So what percentage of your world is science, right? The predictable part. And then what part needs to be left to art, which is then where you can humanize and the exceptional of your employees. So when you have the ABC way, right? So my company, so my LLC is Sherpa. So I'm a business Sherpa. So what is the Sherpa way to do this? And so then when I do it that way, every single time I get consistent results. But then when I go the extra mile, I don't have to worry about the minutia of already what's there. I can do it in my sleep. Now I can just really soar on, how do I take that customer to the next level? What do I need to be able to bring to them? I'm hearing them say problems that they're having that might not be in the process of EOS, but it might be exceptional. And oh, by the way, they might need CAT. I can then think of her, because I'm not stuck in winging it. I can actually think of her and be like, that's the solution. That is the icing on the cake. That is a cherry on the top that they need to get them where they need to go.
Yeah, I love this. When you first said this quote to me, I was like, oh my God, my brain went off in like 6 different ways because it's such a good quote. I think that when you start working with someone who is, again, emotionally unattached, we've talked about this in all 3 of the segments now, they have the ability to kind of poke at you. And you and I were talking about this. When I begin to poke at people's business in a very loving way, as much love as I have for you, it almost makes a client's defenses go up, So I usually take that as the indicator of, I just hit the bruise. I just hit the soft spot in your business. If I say to you, what's your ideal client? And you don't know, you usually will get fairly defensive of your business. Well, to your example, everyone. Oh, okay, everyone, huh? It's not everyone, or if I say to you, well, who's your ideal worker? Everyone. Really? Well, someone who can't pass a drug test, and you have corporate vehicles that you want them to drive, your insurance company might think differently, and so it's important that maybe not at the beginning what you want, but what you don't want is always a good place to start, and you got to know those baselines, because if you fall for anything, right, this is not always going to go in your favor. And you're going to need our second episode about how to survive instead of this one, if that's the case. I think one of the other things that is important to flourishing is identifying what you do consistently. And this is always a really interesting conversation with people who are ready to kind of scale their business, or I think you made a point in our first episode about go from 3 to 5 million or 5 to 10, which are usually big jumps for companies. You always have that top performer. So you have three types of employees. You have the star performer. You have the one who always has the best margin, which we always love them, right? You got to have both of those people. But then you have the consistent producer. And all three of these employees have a consistent number. Now, your top performer, the star of the show every month, top in the leaderboard. By the way, this could be productivity, it could be sales, it could be attendance, whatever it is. They always have a consistent number. Mm-hmm. And that consistency is what you can count on. That's what they will get. And this doesn't normally sit well with those top producers because it's not the same number. It might have a hit out of the park number, but that consistent number is different. And when you're ready to scale, that consistent number is what you're relying on. You and I call them leading indicators in the ownership world.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to your point too, Kat, is, when you have the star performers, and follow along with me here for a little, if you lower that bar, they don't lower. They won't, right? And so my point is how do I get the people that might be at the bar to hear, right? I do it rising tides raises all ships, right? And so what is this person doing that this person is not doing? Maybe they're not capable. That's another whole story. That's another conversation. But there's some things that they're not doing. I love our EOS community full of implementers. I just got off the call this morning about facilitation skills and all that. And there's people that have been doing this 15 years, right? They definitely have things that I don't have. And so they're on these calls giving us all, great information that we're rising our tide to get up to their level. And it's all consistently done. And I think that is the beauty of that is don't worry, always pay attention. So hear me differently on this one. Pay attention to your top performers, but don't worry that if you set that consistency of here's the process here, and then just get the process incrementally better, and then that will happen. So I think people always fear, to your point, is what's the process? Well, Joey does it this way. If it's inconsistently and your results are like a shotgun effect, then we got a problem. But if your top performer is still getting there, what do we learn from there? And then how do we capture that and get that moving?
I work with a company who has an amazing sales trajectory ahead of them. And when we came on board with them, one of their primary objectives was this sales number. Yeah. And their sales staff is all over the board. And so we've got some personnel issues, right? People problem, process problem, management problem. We've got some people problem going on over there. And the owner said to me recently, how did you know that my top performer was an issue? And I said, are you sure you want my answer on this one? Because, we're messing with different things here. He said, I want to know how you knew. I said, because they can't identify what they do consistently. And I think, excuse me, there's some validity in understanding that our employees, if they wanted to be owners, they would be. Yes. Especially our top performers. I was a top performer. I know what it's like. And I was willing to be an owner. So I am. Those top performers, they are willing to work for someone else. There is a reason. There is a motivator. We talked about motivation a couple times now throughout this series. They want to work for you. If they didn't, they'd work for somebody else or they'd work for themselves. There is a point where they need to understand what they do consistently. And by the way, that in and of itself for a top performer is motivating.
Oh, for sure.
If they can say to you, hey, by the way, I do 300% to quota and I do 300% to quota consistently, that's way better than I do 300% to quota once a year.
Right.
So there's value in understanding, like you said, the human element that comes in. Then the scientific part is, okay, how often do you do this? And what value does it bring? And at what quality does it bring? By the way, those are metrics, those are measurables. Right. Then you have the consistent performer that maybe is just hitting or maybe underperforming. At what consistency, at what margin? We talked about the performer who's over profit or over margin every time. Great. Is that overcompensating for the person who's under? These are all measurables, and there's human element in each one of these. And all of those together help exceed the trajectory that you're going to be on. But when that owner came to me and said, how did you know? The answer is because that employee doesn't know what they can do consistently.
Right.
Case in point, that person is potentially cancerous to your culture.
Right. Well, and I think too, to your point too, the thing that sparked me when you were talking, Kat, was I've had not the luxury of having a top performer not know the process. They have. If they're really that great, they actually do want to help.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was maybe an indicator that you didn't really realize or whatever. It's like, and I think you hit on the head when we first started is like, are they helping the team get there? Right. We talked about this, I think in series 1, is the greater good in mind. Like if they're a top performer, there should be no protective, this is my secret sauce. Yeah. It should, right. But there sometimes is. And so sometimes people do know the process. They're not willing to share it because they're nervous, scared, threatened, like I'll use that word lightly, but nervous and scared that if I teach other people how to do this, then I'll be out of a job. Right. So again, checking yourself to check them, right? To say, where is the breakdown? And so that's why it's so much easier to manage processes and everything when it's consistent. You make more money, you have more fun, you do all those things because it is consistent and it has arguably even a cadence to it. And so I think there's some things of that sort that if you have somebody at the top that does not know it, red flag, but that is not willing to help, another red flag, right? Because you are running at 100 miles an hour. I'm not saying be a manager, right? Because sometimes top performing salespeople or top performing anything aren't good with people. Like they don't know how to lead and manage, right? Lead, manage, and hold people accountable. They don't have that skill set, but they're willing to take somebody on their wing for a ride along. They're ready to, right? I know a little bit more about sales than I probably do operations. So my stories are a little bit focused there, but I do think that is also an indicator of why that person may have said that. So I think
their behaviors, right? Their behaviors are duplicatable. Right. In sales or operations or safety or, all those things. If we push it over to the ops side, those things, the common thread across your company, even in HR, is the behaviors that produce the result, the leading indicator. Is duplicatable on some level.
Sure.
And that nudge is where we can start to change the scorecard. It's where we can start to show a measurable improvement across the board and watch your company start to flourish. You're no longer in survival mode, correct, but you're actually in a fish mode. And those are all measurable.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, Kat, I'd like to do a quick little plug. So EOS, we're built of 6 models, 6 key components, right? One of the component is a process component. And so two of our leaders, Lisa and Mike Payton, wrote a book called The Process Book. And so there's lots of process books, guys, out there. If you know anything about EOS, it's a simple set of practical tools. This is stuff that's made for the plumber next door. And I don't mean that derogatory. I mean that out of love and respect from where we're from. It is it is I'll be honest with you, it is the weakest component of most people coming into us. Now, if you're ISO 9000, you're going to say we're not, right? If you're heavily driven, arguably by the FDIC, now we know we're in the middle of some banking things, right? Your usually process is a little bit better, but for most organizations, that's the hardest one. And the hardest thing to grasp is that process is not taking out the art or the creativity of your business. And so a lot of times visionaries who start the business, the guy that says jump, oh, do I have my parachute, is girl, guy, whatever, is protective because they've made this business organic. And so please understand me that making your business organically and processes are very different. People think of them as the same, and it's not. Organic is more about the numbers. As an owner, if you did what you did, you had it all here. You had it all in your brain. You had the process. It was easily scaled because it was just you. You didn't have to train, measure, and hold people accountable to it, right? Now you do have that. And so if that, it's just a good book. And I always plead with my teams, like, fix process first, because it will then be easier to identify people problems and you'll have a lot more fun doing it. And by the way, make a lot more money. So a little shameless plug, but it really is about that. I mean, I think people fight it because it's like, oh, then we won't be able to bob and weave. Bull crap. You'll know exactly where to bob and weave.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about, and by the way, I love the EOS models. I think that there's a ton of it in our training that, as you continue to grow and really kind of figure out where you need to be, there's tons of EOS in our training. And we call it, are your systems duplicatable?
Love it.
If I take you out, does someone know what to do? Can you go on vacation? If you got COVID and no one could reach you, what would happen to your business? Like, these are real world. If you tell me you haven't been on vacation for 5 years, it's a separate conversation. But if you got sick or your spouse got sick and you needed to go take care of them, what would happen to your company? And increasingly, would it be able to thrive? Would it just survive, or would it shut down? And so you kind of have to self-reflect on these, go back to section 1 and listen to Michelle's clarity breaks and write these answers down. You don't have to tell us, but check yourself and decide where you need to be in this process. And then maybe we're happy to help have those conversations with you. In the meantime, Michele, where can someone reach you to have one of those conversations?
Best way to reach me is on my email. So Michele Mollard let me start over with that. Michele Mollard at EOS Worldwide. So Michele is with one L dot, and then my last name is MOLLARD at EOSworldwide.com.
Love that so much. Okay, you can find us on YouTube at Oxygen Coaching, or you can send us an email at info@oxygencoachinggroup.com. Michele, thank you so much. We'll see how everybody's YouTube videos go through the roof because you are so popular on my channel. I appreciate so much that you spent some time with us, and hopefully we will be able to get together and do this again soon, my dear.
I am honored. It is always a blast being on here and being with all your clients. It's just a blast. So
thanks so much. All right, everybody, we tell you to take just a little bit of time to breathe life in, and we hope that your business not only survives, but thrives in 2023. Have a great day, everybody.